So let's begin with just a short introduction by the very nature of the constellations of the zodiac, of the horoscope. It's critical to always emphasize, at least the way I see it, not to get caught up in sensationalism and exotica. People often gravitate to that as a form of escape. I wouldn't call it necessarily an excuse, but so to speak, to blame the stars for our behavior or for our good luck or bad luck really absolves us of the most important dignity of all, and that's personal responsibility. And yet we do know in the Kabbalah and mysticism and other schools of thought, there is the concept of the signs. Each month has its sign, with all the details that come with that. So how do we look at it? Is it something that is nonsense? Is it something that has value? How much power does it have? Should I determine whom to date and what job to take based on different signs? So the way Jewish thought puts it is quite practical, while also very mystical and spiritual. And that is, end of the day, we are all born with all kinds of predispositions and tendencies and inclinations, but nothing controls you. There is no such thing as a predestined future. Your circumstances, whether you'll be born with brown eyes or blue eyes, or brown hair or blonde or red, this height, that height, even to what family you're born into, what country, what schools you'll go to, that's not up to you. But what is up to you is how you will navigate. Now, part of our makeup, our DNA, our genetic makeup is also when we're born. And in that sense, yes, there are different times of the year that have their own, we'll call it predisposed set of conditions, circumstances. But that doesn't control us. It's an inclination. It's like some people are born with a more aggressive nature, some are born with a milder nature. Some are more cerebral, some are more emotional. Some of it is genetic and hereditary, some is not. But the point is, just because we have a predisposition does not mean that defines who you are. And that's critical. How do the Kabbalists put it? That the divine power that created all of existence also created seasons. We know there's winter, there's spring, summer, and autumn. How do you like that? I remember the seasons. There are times of the year where the energy is a very high energy. There's times of joy, and there are times where it's a more subdued energy. But these are energies, these are vibes, these are states of being. The question is how you'll navigate it. Just like if you're out at sea and there's a storm, and sometimes the water is calm. These are real circumstances. They're real factors that have an impact on us, but they don't control us. So in that context, there are times of the year, and here we're talking about the months. Each month has its so-called energy of the month. A predisposition, an inclination. So someone born in a certain time, yes, nothing wrong with saying just like we're born with certain personalities, that time of the year has a certain energy. So to give it too much power and saying that energy defines what I'm going to be or who I am, that's not correct. It defines your circumstances and it defines opportunities as well as challenges. But now you need to navigate. So anyone that over depends on it, that becomes something somewhat, as I said, absolving and losing the dignity of your choices. On the other hand, completely to ignore it, not necessarily. But everything with balance and moderation. With that said, so what do the stars tell about you? They'll tell a lot. They'll tell about those different so-called climates, or archetypes, if you wish, or different personality types. Now we're in the month of Aquarius. In the Hebrew, it's called Deli, the month of Deli, which literally means bucket, water bucket. Aquarius is water carrier. So what is the energy of this month? What does it symbolize, and what does it tell us about someone who's born in this time? And for that matter, even those of us not born in this time of the year, it's still a time of the year that we have opportunities. What's the opportunity of this month? So what is water carrier? What is a water carrier? Sometimes people see that as almost a menial and dismissive type of position. Water carriers, wood choppers are often at the bottom of the rung. Today we may not have those vocations, if you wish, but in the times when it was not necessarily the highest level of work. And yet, the water carrier plays a role. That's a tremendously important role. And when you think about it, it is part of our own soul's makeup that teaches us a very valuable lesson or lessons. So on a very basic level, someone that delivers water, water we know is the essence of life. Our sustenance is dependent on it. Our bodies are made up mostly of water, 75%, whatever the number is. The earth is covered by 2/3 of the earth is water. Without water, we couldn't exist. So it really is the nourishment and the nurturing of everything that grows, including life, ourselves. That's why when they look for water elsewhere in other planets, water is always the first indicator, because without water, there won't be life, at least as we know it. But what's a water carrier? Water carrier is someone that brings you water, that delivers it to you. So one of the ways to understand it is this. In life, you have two choices. You're either a giver or a taker. I mean, obviously, you can mix the two and be sometimes like this, sometimes like that, but it's two different approaches to life. When you're a bearer of light, an ambassador that serves by bringing your unique skills, your unique wisdom, experience to others, you're giving. When you're feeding off someone else, you're taking. Moses, the great Moses, why was he called Moses or Moshe in the Bible? Interestingly, it's not the name his parents gave him. It's the name that Pharaoh's daughter gave him because she found him in a basket in the water in the river Nile, and she drew him out of water. She called him, Min hamayim mishisiu is the verse in the Bible. Somewhat of an ancient Egyptian to draw out water from water. Why would they give him a name like that? And that become the name, that the only name we know. Even though we know the names his parents gave him, but that's the name that he's known as. Explain the Kabbalah is a beautiful concept. Because Moses was a man of water. That there are two types of souls. There are water souls and land souls. Water souls come from a deeper, hidden place. Water is called the concealed worlds. We call it the superconscious. I like the word super, not unconscious or sub, which sounds like subterranean. The superconscious, beyond conscious experience. Moses was a soul from that reality. There are souls that are land souls. They come from the revealed spiritual worlds. The difference would be the difference between thought and speech. When you speak, you're revealing your feelings, your ideas. When you think, only you know what they're like. Like water. Things that are submerged in water, concealed in the water. Moses came from that world of thought. But his mission was to be a carrier, an interface, a channel between the superconscious and the conscious. And that's why that was the name that she gave him, whether she knew it or not, consciously or not. But that was the name, because that was his role. That's why the Bible tells us that Moses was a man of no words. That's why when God said to him, you be my messengers, speak to Pharaoh, he says, I cannot speak. I'm a man of no words. He uses different expressions. My lips are sealed, or difficult for me to speak. And God says, who gives man a mouth to speak? It is I. I want you to say my words. I'm not looking for an orator. There's someone that has a perfectly honed voice. because I want you to express ideas that are beyond regular words. And here's the man of no words that left us words that are the best-selling book in all of history. His words have been repeated and continue to be repeated and studied and pored over and analyzed more than anyone else's words, because they weren't just words. They were carrying the secrets of the hidden world of water. So he was a water carrier. And that's why you find expressions of water always identify with knowledge. In the book of Isaiah, a beautiful verse about messianic times, there will be no longer evil or destruction in this world. Why? Because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. We're told that when the world was created, it was all covered in water. Even according to science, many theories believe that. And then land emerged. We, for 9 months, were completely submerged in the embryonic fluids in our mother's womb. And that's why water is such a critical component in our lives. Not just drinking water to nourish us, but we go into water, you feel nurtured, you feel surrounded, you feel submerged, like in a womb. It's calming. Beachfront property. Yes, it's beautiful sights, but there's something about water that draws us. Because we naturally come from a deeper world that we're not able to articulate. A man like Moses was that water carrier. So each of us has the Moses within us. We all have that ability and responsibility to be water carriers, especially those that are born in this period of time. What does that mean? It means to bring a message to others, a watery message. And water, as we know, is a cleanser. It's associated with things being submerged in water. It represents what in the Hasidic terminology and mystical terminology is called bittul. It's fluid, not solid, but not quite invisible. It has that, the solidity, solidness, and solid things, concrete, are inflexible. Water is continuously fluid, continuously mobile. Whatever you put in water is submerged within it. That's what true humility, modesty, suspending yourself in the face of something greater. That's what it means to enter into water. So we're carrying message of truth, carrying message of healthy knowledge, not information. We're talking about intimate knowledge, the knowledge of life, the secrets of life. That's what we have to be, water carriers. Aquarius. And that's the energy of this month. Every month has its own energy. That's the energy of this month. So think about it. Next time you meet someone, are you delivering to them a message from a deeper place? A message of inspiration, of warmth, of nurturing. A message that submerges them into something deeper, something greater. That when you're covered in the water, you feel that you're part of something beyond you. Exactly that sensation. So imagine if you saw your life as being a water carrier. Not that bad of a job. Today with technology, we can do it through social media, through messages, through email, other forms of communication. I'm right now trying to be somewhat of a water carrier. I hope I'm successful. And I hope you'll do the same in your own way, through your own channels and your own sphere of influence and your own ways of reaching people. There's that parable, famous parable about a water carrier. Where someone had experienced real setbacks and difficulties in life. Didn't know really how to deal with it. So he was told this anecdote, this parable. Every day the gardener would walk to water the garden. So he'd walk along a path. And he would go to the garden and water it. And that was what kept it blossoming, growing, beautiful, flourishing. But then something interesting happened. As he would walk down this path, people noticed that on the left side of the path, flowers began to grow. On the right side of the path, it was completely parched, nothing there. What was the reason for this phenomenon? Until someone pointed out that in his watering pot, in his deli, in his pail, there was a hole. And as he was walking along the path, the hole was on the left side. So water would leak out onto the ground and ultimately cause these flowers to start growing. The right side was the pail was complete. Now you think a hole in the pail is a bad thing. But even here you see, no, that leak is what brought those flowers to grow. So in life, sometimes watering something is not always what we do intentionally. Sometimes it's something we may not even be perfect in. But still, water is coming out of us. So remember, even things that sometimes seem imperfect, a crack, as Leonard Cohen says, forget your perfect offering. Life is filled with cracks. That's how the light gets in. Yes, and that's how the water gets out and makes things grow. So being water carrier doesn't mean you have to be a perfect person. It means you have to always be in that mode of sharing, of bringing light, of bringing water, of bringing sustenance, energy, vitality, refreshing, revitalizing people. You see someone's a little down, saying a kind word. That's the message, my friends. And all of us are truly water carriers. Think about it. Put yourself in that mode. Try it out. Even once a day, especially during this month. You'll be surprised at the results. You will cause flowers to grow, often in places you wouldn't even have imagined. Because when we water things, that's how flowers grow. You can't pull a flower out of the ground. You have to water it. Same thing with souls. You nurture people, you validate them, kind word, something warm, water them, and love blossoms. That's how we nurture and we nourish and we feed each other. So my dear fellow water carrier, do your job well, and please share this with others. Imagine each of us in our own way doing this, what kind of world we would create, what kind of flowers would be growing. That's our commitment. Simon Jacobson here, Meaningful Life Center, meaningfullife.com. If you enjoyed this message, please share it with others. Love to hear your feedback, thoughts, comments. And with technology today, it's very easy to just pass this on to someone else. Just press a button. So we're entering into the next constellation, Pisces, which in ancient Latin means fish or fishes, two fish to be exact. So what does it tell us about ourselves, our personalities, our archetype? So we'll take a mystical look at it. The mystics explain that there are two types of souls. We'll call them amphibian souls and land souls. Water souls and land souls. What is the difference between water and land? We all know that beneath the water is plenty of land. There are mountains and valleys and earthquakes and volcanoes, species that are even more in number than on land. The difference is that they're concealed, they're covered up. They're covered up with water. So the mystics explain that the difference between the two, and they use this term, is that water refers to the hidden worlds, and land refers to the revealed worlds. A very basic example would be the difference between thought and speech. When you speak, your words are heard, they're articulated, they're expressed. Others can hear them. It's revealed. Your thoughts are yours and yours alone. There are words there as well, and there are ideas and letters. However, they're all concealed. They're submerged in the power and the energy of your thought. to the point that sometimes you don't even discern and recognize the distinct letters and words. Sometimes you can think in words, but regardless, it's concealed. So essentially, all the objects that exist in the water are submerged in another reality. So the fish in the sea represent creatures that are completely and always submerged, in a sense, sublimated in a reality beyond themselves, to the point that the fish can be even considered to be like water, like the world of thought. The world of speech, on the other hand, though we're dependent on oxygen, and we're also submerged within our oxygen, but it's not quite as obvious. We're walking entities, separate entities, and we've actually developed ways to lift ourselves above the ground through vehicles or other manners, where a fish can never separate itself from the sea. We can separate ourselves from land. We've gone to outer space. We can fly in an airplane. When I say land, I mean the earth, the ground. A fish cannot separate itself from its source, which is another distinction. 1 second that it leaves its life source. Its very life is dependent on it. So how is that representative in our own human psyches and our own souls? That one is a soul who's submerged in the spirit. Another expression, they say, we're not physical beings on a spiritual journey, we're spiritual beings on a physical journey. Water souls are far more cognizant and aware of their spiritual nature. And they actually feel that they're from an ethereal other reality. And that's what they're submerged in. That doesn't mean there's no entity there, where there are actual fish in the sea. But the fish are, think of the psyche of a fish, is completely submerged, completely dissolved and absorbed in something greater than itself. Land souls are also very spiritual, perhaps, but their focus is much more on their distinct identities. So you can say one is dissolved in something beyond, and one is its distinct identity, like the letters of speech, in contrast to the letters of thought. That's why you'll see people who are simply wired that way. They're wired to be more soulful, often poetic, romantic, some would even say naive, dreamers. And there are people who are much more practical. You can say street smart, grounded. This isn't a popularity contest, one better than the other. They both are necessary in this world. But Pisces represents that element, the fish personality. The ability also to be dissolved and absorbed in something beyond you. Some people's egos don't allow them to do that. And we're not talking about an unhealthy ego, someone who's insecure and is loud and arrogant and aggressive simply to establish their presence. We're talking now in a healthy way. Some people, their identity is very individualistic, and they don't easily assimilate and become absorbed in something beyond them. The truth is we all need it, but there are personality types that are more fish-like, and there are personality types that are more land-like. The ultimate goal is bridging the two, and we discussed this in a previous episode of this series, in Aquarius. But here the focus is on the fish in the sea itself. So when we talk about the concept of being fish-like, indeed, it describes certain souls whose lives are like the fish in the sea. That's where they're immersed in. They're immersed in something that is often beyond the regular routine. But we have here two fish. So in some of the descriptions of the two fish, they talk about two fish swimming in opposite directions, somewhat reflecting the two poles of fantasy and reality. Sometimes you dream, but it has to be grounded in reality. Now that makes total sense when you think about it, because even the fish in the sea also need a certain element of grounding. However, when it comes to Pisces, it goes even further than that. It's associated with the attribute of joy. So you may have heard of the month in the Hebrew month of Adar, the month of joy. Now what is joy connected with water, with fish? Well, it's the same idea. And we'll look at it from a different angle. People say often, I'm just not wired to be a happy person. I'm just not joyous. How can you regulate joy? It's an emotion. And the answer is you don't regulate it. All of us have natural joy within us. Do you ever see a child, except under extenuating circumstances or something unnatural, that's unhappy? We're born happy because every soul is by nature like a fish in water. Because joy is the inherent state of our internal superconsciousness, which is like water. It's when we engage with land, when we engage with the forces and the elements of a land-like existence separate from our source, then that consciousness and self-consciousness is what creates the dissonance, which leads us to states that are not joyous and not happy. So joy, if you think about it, when a person is happy, there's no real sensation. We're not talking about necessarily dancing and celebrating. It's just an internal sense of contentment, a sense of joy. You feel you belong. You feel a seamlessness, like a fish in the water. When they say fish in water, everything is working so smoothly, seamlessly. When there's dissonance, there's a disconnect. That's much more in the revealed worlds, where the words can be disconnected from the ideas. So that's why fish in the sea so much are connected to that element of joy, the month of joy. One more point that's critical to make when you're talking about this is that fish are also being submerged. That's why you'll find in the Bible blessings that you should be as multiple as the fish in the sea. Why like the fish in the sea? So the Talmud tells us, because true blessings thrive, blossom, when they're not visible. When they're visible, then they're subject sometimes to another person's resentments or another person's reactions. That's why it's often good to be under the radar when you're blessed. Not just not to create jealousy or envy and so on, but blessings thrive when they're not being looked at precisely, meaning measured and judged and so on. So all of this tells us that we have access to another world, an otherworldly experience. And that's what the Pisces personality is like. Fish in the sea. Now, those born in that period, obviously, have that predisposition. But all of us have that aspect. We have to remember that all the signs of the entire year, we all have that. The question is, what is primary? What's the dominant gene, so to speak? What's the dominant predisposition? But everybody needs a Pisces within themselves. Another thing that can be said about the two fish, the concept that Ezekiel in his vision talks about, that energy flows to and fro. Tension and resolution. The fish, two fish going in different directions. Which doesn't mean necessarily opposites. It can mean it's the flow, it's the poles, the two polarities, positive and negative, contraction, expansion, exhale and inhale. So as we experience, just as you think about water, you also think about waves. What is a wave? A wave is essentially like the wave of a heartbeat, of a cardiogram. It's what? Peaks and valleys, ups and downs. It's constant movement. We know a wave is not like a particle. It's a constant fluid movement, a pulsating energy, which is also very much part of the watery personality of Pisces, of the fish. We live so much, so consumed by our five senses that stimulate our vision, our sight, our sound, our taste, touch, and smell. We sometimes forget about that which is more deeply submerged within. We forget about the fish because they're not obvious, they're not visible. But they're there. And each of us has that as a blessing, as a gift. It's our inner treasure. When someone gets to know you, you don't just want to know their external and superficial identity, and you want them to know, you don't want them just to look at you superficially. You want to understand the fish personality. What do you like? Where do you feel that you belong? Where do you feel like you're a fish in water? Seamless. There's an expression in Isaiah, he says, that the world will no longer be, there will no longer be evil and destruction in the world because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. The waters cover the sea. They cover the seabed. Submerged. There's nothing more beautiful than when you feel that you're part of something greater than yourself. That's why it's so beautiful and so harmonious, so comfortable. When you feel nurtured, you go in the water. You ever lie in the water and you just allow yourself to be submerged? Something about it, something nurturing. Of course, it reminds us, consciously or subconsciously or superconsciously, of the 9 months we were in our mother's womb, completely submerged in the embryonic fluids. Because it's a state of attachment, of nurturing, of belonging. That's the fish within each one of us, the Pisces. And the key is to hold on to that and draw from there. To draw from there to the point that we can access that and extend it even into our land activities. And indeed, Pisces is the fourth, the last of the water signs, followed by the previous three, because it's the ultimate picture. It's not just a water carrier, but it's also water itself. So when you ask the question, does water get wet? Can wetness get wet? Does a fish get wet? Think about it. That's a state of being. That's the state of being we want to feel like. A dry hand is submerged in water. A dry thing will get wet. That's where subject and object are experiencing two different entities. There's a certain duality, a dissonance. But when wetness doesn't get wet, it is wetness. So may we all be blessed with having that type of sense of belonging, where you don't feel that isolation, you don't feel that alienation, you feel connected, you feel that you're part of your higher source, and that drives your life. So even when you enter into the worldly, we'll call it earth-like, land-like routines, you can bring that seamlessness and that wholesomeness into every one of your experiences. May each of us be blessed to achieve exactly that. We are now at the beginning of the order, begins with Aries, translated as ram, the animal ram, but as we shall discuss, it has many other dimensions to it. And it's interesting, it begins with this. This is the first of all the 12, and indeed that corresponds with the Hebrew months, the first of the 12 lunar months, the month of Nisan. So there is a connection. What I found very interesting is that when you look up all the astrological interpretation of Aries, it's often identified with aggression, with leadership, with persistence, something like the headstrong ram. But I believe that's connected far more with mythical interpretations. I would like to introduce you to what may be the original meaning and significance of this month's sign. So as I said, the translation of Aries is usually ram. But as we know, sheep is the real full category that has the male adult sheep is a ram, the female adult sheep is a ewe, and the baby sheep is a lamb. So in Hebrew, the first of the 12 signs is Toleh, a lamb. So if you think about it actually in a broader sense, Aries is not just ram, it considers perhaps the whole category of sheep. Now the interesting thing is that sheep are known for their docile nature, their tame nature. One of the only animals that is not a predator. They feed off and graze in the grass. And when there is a predator, their only protection is to escape, is to run. They have no other weapons, or no weapons at all. So extremely vulnerable, which explains something really fundamental. When you look at the Bible, and in general in our vernacular, you find the concept of sheep or shepherds used sometimes in spiritual sense. Moses was called a shepherd, the faithful shepherd. God is often referred to as a shepherd, and souls are referred to as sheep. So as a shepherd protects his sheep, God or Moses, the leader, protects its disciples or its followers or its community. As a matter of fact, the first time Moses is described in the Bible, it says he was a shepherd. Similar to David, he was a shepherd. And we're explaining why. Why is that like such a significant title? Because a shepherd reflects the real essence of a true leader, sensitivity. And the Medrash tells us a story. It goes like this. That when Moses was the shepherd for his future father-in-law, Jethro, so he had thousands of sheep that were grazing, and Moses noticed that one sheep was missing. So he went off looking for the sheep. And he found it a little distant away, had traveled off, and it was sipping water from a brook. And he realized that the sheep was thirsty. And in his sensitivity, he carried the sheep back on his shoulder to the flock. And the Medrash tells us that when God saw that, he said, if he is so sensitive to one sheep, imagine among thousands of sheep, first of all, to notice it. Second of all, to pursue it. If he's so sensitive to a sheep and no one's watching, how much more sensitive he will be to my people. Sensitivity. And the same with King David. Also, it says leaders are tested by sheep. So one quality is sensitivity. Many of us associate leadership with aggression, with ego, with power. It's actually the ultimate leader is the most sensitive, the most empathetic, the most heart, compassion. Which takes us into this time of the year. What is this, the first month, or we'll call it the first sign? It's associated, as I mentioned, with the month of Nisan. It's the month of Exodus from Egypt. In the Bible again, God tells Moses, look up to the sky, the new moon. In this new moon of the month of Nisan, I'm giving you a new calendar. Not just a solar calendar, but a lunar calendar. And the beginning of the lunar calendar, it is in this month, in the Hebrew, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This month, the word month in Hebrew comes from the word renewal. Well, this will be the first month of the year of renewal, the renewal of the moon. The sun, though it goes through gradations, but we don't see renewal quite the same way. In the moon, you actually see rebirth. And the moon is also connected to a certain element we'll call sensitivity, or in the Hebrew, bittul. What's bittul? A certain sense of humility, modesty. The moon wanes and almost disappears. It's always in the state of receiving. So the moon represents the docile, the vulnerable. But then it gets renewed at the beginning of the month. And in this month, the people, my people, your people, the sheep will experience renewal. They will leave the difficult genocide and bondage that they suffered at, oppressed, afflicted by the Egyptians. And from here on, we will have Passover. And what's Passover? It's symbolized by the bringing of the Paschal lamb. Lamb. And one of the primary reasons for that was because the Egyptians actually saw the lamb as a deity. Sheep as a deity. To the point that we read in the book of Genesis, when Joseph first speaks to his brothers, he says, don't tell them that you're shepherds. Say you're herdsmen. Because for the Egyptians, a shepherd is an abomination. They consider it despicable, reprehensible. The question is why? So the commentary, Rashi explains right there, because for them, sheep are deities. And shepherds, as the commentaries explain, see that a sheep is not a deity. It's a beautiful, gentle creature, but it's not a god. And that's why they despised shepherds. So when it came to freedom, the freedom of Passover, what is it symbolized by? A Paschal lamb. This does not mean that Aries doesn't have a connection to a ram. Because remember, ram, lamb are all part of the same family. But we're focusing on what's part of it. We're focusing on the humility part, the sensitivity, the gentleness, the vulnerability. The question is, how do you look at vulnerability? Do you turn it into a god? Or do you realize it's something that you need to protect? And what they're basically were making a statement was that we need shepherds to protect the sheep. And the Egyptians said, no, we worship the sheep. We don't need shepherds. We don't need these type of leaders. And indeed, Egypt represented the antithesis of selflessness. It was about ego. Pharaoh called himself a god. He considered himself a god. A Passover was about, we don't worship men or men who think they're gods. We only worship a higher reality. And yes, as beautiful as a lamb, as a ram, as a sheep is, but those are not gods. Those are features and virtues that we need to embrace. So Aries, this month's sign, symbolizes the sensitivity, the gentleness, the humility, but also recognizing that we're not self-made creatures. And that's what the real message of Passover was. True freedom is when you stop worshiping yourself and your own man-made devices. And then we recognize that a true shepherd, a true leader, had Pharaoh been a true leader, a true shepherd, instead of hating shepherds, instead of despising them and seeing them as abomination, he would have introduced the concept of humility. But instead, no, he was the arrogant one. So you see here how it all comes together, the history of it, the holiday, this month. So in context of those of us born in this period of time, or we're talking about for all of us as we travel through this period, the first of the zodiac, the first of the 12 signs, Taleh, in Hebrew, Aries, we need to remember the idea of being sensitive. The idea of bittul, that our lives are dedicated to something greater than we are. And indeed, that's the key feature and personality type connected to this sign. Now, as I discussed in the previous parts of this series, this doesn't mean it's exclusive only to those born in the month of Aries, but also to all of us. It's just a question, what is the dominant, what is the primary and the predominant feature? And we all can learn from each other, and we all need from each other. The concept of recognizing that we are really, in many ways, like a sheep, like a lamb, like a ram. Yes, there are times a ram is aggressive, especially in a breeding season, because remember, it's not about weakness, it's about gentleness. In this world that we live in, sometimes we confuse that. We think someone who is vulnerable or someone who is sensitive is weak. That's not the case. The strongest people are sensitive people. And indeed, that's the key to all growth and to all freedom. And that's why this is also the month of freedom, the month of liberation it's called, the month of redemption. So paradoxically, the sun is all powerful. It gives off light. The moon is a recipient. It reflects light. But the moon has something that the sun doesn't have. You never see two lovers staring at the sun, but you see them gazing at the moon. The haunted moon, the haunting moon, has a certain element, a certain mystique to it. And though it's reflecting the sunlight, but it doesn't look like the sun. It has its own shade, has its own color. And it goes through the changes of life. It's far more reflective of reality, the ups and downs of life, waxing and waning. And at the moment where you think it may disappear, it's reborn again. And so too are we. And it's embracing, celebrating our vulnerability, celebrating the idea that at times, yes, we are not predators. And we need a shepherd. We need the divine shepherd, the Moses in our lives, to help guide us, to help protect us. But there's a Moses within each one of us as well. And we have that divine soul. So celebrating that gentleness is the key energy of this month. How much we can use that today? Well, how much arrogance, ego, power, control, money. It's recognizing that we are greater when we recognize what we're not than what we are. And when you're dedicated to something greater than yourself, you become an extension of that. You know, everybody's looking for the secret to eternity, the fountain of youth. So we've had the pharaohs in the pyramids through mummifying or other methods trying to create some eternity. We have other modern methods. But ultimately, the secret to eternity is to committing your life to something greater than yourself, to being a sheep, to being a lamb of a greater shepherd. And when you become dedicated to eternity, you become an extension of eternity. And then you become indestructible. And that's the power of this month. So it's quite powerful. And it also makes sense because it's the beginning. With this, the entire year begins. So it infuses each of the signs and each of the months with this power. And then when you combine them with the different 12 signs, you come away with a complete spectrum, a full picture. To just give one demonstration of how do we get into that Aries type of state of mind, is to recognize that no matter how much we know and how much we've accomplished, there's so much more to know. So I've often told this analogy. In the good old days, in the shtetl, in the town, the old towns, there was a city called Chelm. It was actually wise people, but their neighbors were resentful, so they created this folklore of the fools of Chelm. In Chelm, the small town, there was a farm, and there was a farmer who took care of his little farm. Even though it was a small farm, but it was his. He had inherited it from his parents and grandparents. He knew every grain of soil. He took care of it. It was his baby. One day, he gets a visitor from a big city farmer from Iowa. Thousands of acres, bigger than the entire city of Chelm, maybe bigger than entire Poland. And he gives him a royal tour of his Chelm farm. And they sit down afterwards to dinner, and he says, "What do you think about my farm here?" He says, "Nice and cute, but it's so tiny." And the Chelm farmer's taken aback and says, "So tiny? How big is your farm back in Iowa, in the United States?" He said, "Well, how is he going to have to find a point of reference?" He says to him, "My town, my farm. It takes me all day to travel with my tractor from one end of the farm to the next." And suddenly, the Chelm farmer changes his demeanor, feels compassion for this big city farmer, and says to him, "Don't feel bad. I once had a tractor like that too." In other words, he couldn't even fathom that size of a farm. So he thought when it takes him all day, it must have been the vehicle is the problem. It took him all day to crank up this old shmata jalopy to move from here to here. Now he wasn't malicious. He was not being in any way fictitious. He was ignorant. That was the farm he could envision. So if someone asks you a question, are you closed-minded, narrow-minded, or subjective? Most of us will not say we're narrow-minded and closed-minded. Because part of being subjective, it makes you think you're objective. But we're only as objective as our perspectives allow us. We each have our farms. And that's what it means to be a sheep. It means to be a lamb. It means to be a ram. It's a recognition that there's a far bigger picture than you are. When you do that, you open yourself up to those horizons. But sometimes we get stuck in our myopic vision. We think that's all there is. You ask someone, what does the horizon look like? If you're staying in a valley, there's one answer. If you're standing at the plateau, on flat ground, there's another answer. If you're standing 10 feet up on a mountain, a third answer. And if you're on top of Mount Everest, a fourth answer. And they're all true, because everyone's perspective shows them a different horizon. So in this month of Aries, let us all embrace, celebrate the understanding of a bigger picture, and that allows us to experience the renewal of the moon, the love of the moon, the vulnerability of life that opens us up to dimensions that we could never reach when we feel all powerful and all dominant. And that truly leads us to true redemption. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson. What do the stars tell us about ourselves? We've covered the month of Aries. There are many different ways to explain and interpret the signs as they apply to our lives, the predispositions that they help defining our personalities, our characteristics. I want to take a particular focus here on the series. There's three, we'll call it the 3 months, the 3 signs that began with Aries, followed by Taurus, and now Gemini. Besides that, each has their own self-contained message, but they also complement each other and actually work and grow and progress one into the next. So we know the first of all the 12 signs begins with Aries, which corresponds to the Hebrew month of Nisan, which is the first of the 12 lunar months. So this perspective I'm taking from the Jewish mystical and Kabbalistic teachings. Aries, which is usually translated ram or lamb, is followed by Taurus, the bull. In a previous part of this series, we discussed the difference between the two. One is more docile, one is more gentle, and the other more aggressive. Corresponding to the two poles, the two polar opposites of chesed and gvura, which is kindness, gentleness, and discipline, strength. Both are necessary, and they both complement each other. But they're different types of personality types. Now we come to Gemini, twins. Te'umim in Hebrew, twins. Twins immediately tell us that there isn't one, there's two, but they're twins, which means there's something that corresponds, something that connects, something that's in common between the two. So here's how the mystics, the Kabbalists put it. That everything in existence is structured in threes. There's the right, there's the left, there's the center. Nothing can stand if it doesn't have 3 legs. And what is the right, left, and center? The right brain, the left brain, the center brain. Right arm, left arm, the heart. Right leg, left leg, the center. The center is considered the foundational element. The right and left, in a sense, spread it out. If you think of a trunk of a tree, that would be the center, like the spine in the human body. And then it branches to right and to left. Right generally are the more kinder and gentler attributes. The ones that flow forward, like water, corresponds to the right. Fire corresponds to the left. Blue, red. Both absolutely necessary. In human relationships, the idea of kindness, of course, love, is the foundation of every relationship, is the foundation of existence. However, love also needs to be balanced. Balanced with discipline. You can suffocate someone with love. You could drown a field, even though rain is giving love, but the rain has to come in raindrops. So you have the other side, which seasons, which regulates, which guides, which disciplines. And we call that strength. We call that discipline. We call it sometimes the more severe side, but not severe necessarily in a negative way. It's just much more discretionary. That may be the best word, discretion. So they balance and they counter each other. Aries, Taurus. And then comes the third, the Geminis, the twins. The twins is harmony within diversity. It's understanding that different entities have different personalities, have different ways of looking at things. And you're looking for that, not just the common denominator, you're looking for that higher transcendent force that sees the strengths in each one of them and provides a synergy of something more than the sum of the parts. So in life, there's a give and take. You receive a blessing from above, the blessing of life. Parents, others that have helped shape and helped bring you where you are right now. Then there's the things that you do through your initiative, your efforts. And then we need to join the two of them. You want to have the best of both worlds. And that comes to what we call, in the sporadic structure, Tiferes, harmony, beauty. Think of beauty. What's a beautiful thing? The color blue can be very beautiful. The color red can be beautiful. One musical note can be beautiful, but we don't really call that beauty. One note, you keep playing it, it gets monotonous. One color will also be monotonous. Beauty is actually harmony within diversity. You say a beautiful face. Is it the eyes, the ears, the nose, the complexion, the cheeks, the forehead? It's a combination of all of them that just come together in this harmony. When you hear a beautiful song, it's many different musical notes and perhaps many different instruments. But they all come together in the right order. And then they're more, not just you bringing together pieces, it's more than the sum of the parts, what we call synergy. In biblical terms, you talk about the first day, the second day, and the third day of creation. The first day, the creation of light, a light. The second day, the division of the higher and the lower, diversity, which can go toward divisiveness, unfortunately, but could also lead to day 3, where you bring the diversity together in one harmonious, synergetic, synchronized whole. And that's the twins. Two different forces. Now, we're the first set of twins that we're familiar with. Jacob and Esau, the biblical twins, who were at each other's throats, literally, from the moment that they were conceived. Or not necessarily the moment, but even in pregnancy. They represent the tension between matter and spirit. A tension we all can experience, and we all do experience. The need to survive, the need to pay our bills, the need to make ends meet, the need to take care of our material needs. But we also have a transcendent side to us, a spirit. And they often conflict with each other. There is a tension between matter and spirit, matter and energy. The twins is the resolution of that tension. And how do you resolve it? By spiritualizing the material. By bringing out the best in each. There are schools of thought that preach asceticism. That in order to experiencing anything that is more sublime, higher states of consciousness and awareness, you need to escape, you need to cut off from the rush hour of the rat race and the merry-go-round, the roller coaster of life. Asceticism. An austere, simple life. Others argue, think of the Calvinistic Protestant work ethic. No, engage with the world, but be kind, be virtuous, be charitable. But if you want high levels of spirituality, you can't really do that when you're consumed with or involved in the material existence. So most of us compartmentalize. This is the conflict between home and career, home and work. The conflict between our selfless side to ours and our selfish side. The conflict between faith and modernity. It manifests in so many different ways. Could materialism and spirituality ostensibly seem to be antithetical? But then comes the twins, Gemini, and teaches us that's not the case. They can be a major conflict. It could be the root of all discord and all war and tension and battle. But they could also come together and complement each other. When you recognize that they're both two parts of one larger whole, two twins, well, I should say one set of twins, two individuals that are very different in personality, but they complement each other. The body is the vehicle that allows us to manifest our ideals, our values, our transcendent longings. On the other hand, what's a vehicle without the captain of the ship? So they should be working hand in hand, and that's what Gemini is about. And that's why the Gemini personality will often have certain dual tugging the person one direction, the other direction. But the goal and the purpose is to know that you could integrate, you could harmonize, you could bring them together. And that is the Gemini power, which is one for all of us, but especially someone born or someone associated with this particular time of the year. That's the predominant predisposition. And it teaches us all and allows us all to glean and draw energy from the month of Gemini, the energy of integration, of looking at the different fragments of our lives, the different parts, and seeing how can we synergize, how can we find that common thread that ties it all together into one beautiful tapestry, that harmony within diversity. And this applies both individually, each one of us, the conflicts we have, our psychological, emotional, different voices, different expectations, demands on us, but also collectively. We all dream of a world of peace, of harmony, but yet look how elusive it is. Different viewpoints, different faiths, different religions, different belief systems. Intolerance is because we're not tapping into the Gemini energy of that third path, the middle path, the one that takes the best of the other two, of the right and left, and turns it into something far deeper. But whenever you see different opinions, and if you're able to bring them together, you'll always come away with a third approach which transcends both of them and actually uses both of them to find a deeper solution, a more crystallized one. So indeed, it is the Tiferes, it is the third, it is the Gemini that we're all seeking. Those synchronized twins. In recent years, the concept of mirror neurons has begun to capture our imagination. The idea that we mirror each other's neurons. The classic example, whatever reason, maybe we can identify with it. You see somebody about to close the door on their finger, and you'll say, ouch. Even though you're not there, you're not feeling it, because you identify, we mirror and reflect each other's neurons. Some will call it empathy. Empathy, which indeed is part of the Gemini personality, a certain element of empathy. What is empathy? That we go outside of our own confines, our own boundaries, our own parameters, and we can experience another. Because that indeed is the secret to create such harmony. Because as long as a person is controlled by their ego, and by the need for control, and by the need to dominate, then you will be who you are, and others will either have to be subjugated to you, or in some ways subdued, or surrender, or annihilated even, as you see in relationships. Often there's a dominant partner and a submissive one, a passive one. But true beauty is always going to be two individuals, twins. Each one brings their strengths, then they come together. More than the sum of the parts. And that is a third deeper energy, but that requires an element of selflessness, an element of modesty, the way I like to put it, a suspension of your own interest in order to experience something greater than yourself. That's what true love is. Not just to give, not just to take, but love is the ability to transcend yourself. Find something deeper that you could never find on your own without the other. And the same thing with the other looking at you. Twins, each coming with their own uniqueness, but at the same time complementing each other. It's a beautiful concept, but how do we begin? You begin by simply looking at yourself and lowering the temperature of your own demands and needs, of your own ego, of your own self-contained, driven force, what we call self-interest. And recognize that we are truly all parts of something greater. We are parts of a larger tapestry, a cosmic symphony. And each of us is absolutely needed, while also being complemented by everyone around us. So Gemini is ultimately the marriage between heaven and earth. The hug, the embrace, the kiss between the spirit and matter, between energy and matter. And indeed, going back to the biblical story, what do you find? That in Aries, in Nisan, was the redemption of going out of the limitations, the Exodus. Then came Taurus, which was the efforts and the initiative that comes from below, not just as a gift from above. And then the third month, the month of Sivan, is the month of Sinai, the revelation, where heaven and earth met for the first time. The power that it infused us all to be able to spiritualize the material world, to turn the physical into something soulful. Not as two separate worlds, not as a dichotomy. To use Einstein's most famous formula, E equals mc squared. Energy is matter times the speed of light squared. And that creates, and it helps us understand that matter and energy are truly reversible. And in turn, are really two parts of one whole. So, as we enter this month of Gemini, of twins, may we find those two forces within us, empower each one, but also teach them to speak to each other, to coordinate, and then let it spill over to our families, to our communities, to our cities, to our populations, in a beautiful ripple effect of experiencing the ultimate harmony within diversity. Those of us that have that Gemini character prominent should use it to teach others how we create such harmony. The sign, the month of Taurus. Translated into English, Taurus is bull. In Hebrew, it's shar, sometimes also translated as ox. What's interesting is that when you look at this order of the signs, the previous month, Aries was ram or lamb, as we discussed in that part. So to really appreciate the personality type and the energy of Taurus, it would be good to contrast it. And here, to make it even more fascinating, this is the second sign of the constellations that began with the first Hebrew month, the first lunar month of the lunar year, Nisan, the month of Exodus, which is associated with the gentleness and the love of the ram, of the lamb, Eris. And that leads us to the bull, which is also another animal, but in this case, very different type of personality. So, by means of a short introduction, as I've spoken several times about this topic, the zodiac and the different signs and constellations are a combination of forces that reflect that energy is time and time is energy, and that each energy, each period, has this particular channel and its window of opportunity and its particular complexion, which is the energy of that month, of that time period. And when you look at them all 12 of them, you come away with a tapestry, a type of harmony, each one complementing the other. So just let's use a simple example when it comes to life in general. The way life is structured is we are first born as children, nurtured, protected, loved, unconditionally validated. The security, the trust that's built up. And as children, we're on the receiving end of that love. And of course, we're talking about a healthy situation where all that is provided. That prepares the child with the resources and the tools and the confidence. As the child grows into adult, it can become a responsible, independent adult. And now, instead of just being on the receiving end, the child begins to give back, to carry the load, and not just the load be carried for the child. So the mystics explain that the same is true in the months and the signs. That the first sign is one, we talk about Aries, we talk about the ram, we talk about sheep, we talk about a lamb. You'll see that the relationship is you're not going to put heavy loads on top of that animal. It's mostly the shepherd nurturing and shepherding its flock. The bull, on the other hand, is, as one of the verses states in scriptures, it carries weight. It can carry a heavy weight, and it has that element of strength and power. In the sporadic structure of the 7 emotions, we talk first about chesed, about love and kindness, and then we talk about gvura, discipline, strength, restraint. And that's the shift from Aries to Taurus. That Taurus personality, after we've received the love and the nurturing, now comes the next step where we carry the load. The personality of the Taurus is the carrier, is the commitment. In context of emotional relationships, love and reverence, love and respect. Any good relationship needs both elements. Love is what creates closeness, intimacy, protection, security. But at the same time, you can also suffocate someone with love. And that's why you need to have boundaries, respect. A healthy relationship will always have a certain reverence and respect for the dignity and space of another. And there's nothing wrong is to stand even in awe of the mystique and the mystery. And you'll see a healthy relationship will have both. So Taurus introduces that strength, that power. Now you're ready to carry a load. So when it's combined with the previous sign, you have really essentially 2 personality types. So in our personal lives, we need both. We need to be recipients. We need the love, we need that support, but we also have to be givers. And we have to demonstrate that strength and that persistence. Now, if you have one without the other, you'll always have a compromise. Because strength can also go the wrong way. The bull is also known for its inflexibility, for its stubbornness. And that's why we need to understand the perfect balance. Stubbornness can be used for good when it's commitment, and you don't give up when it's difficult. It won't retreat. You'll see the nature of a bull is that it forges ahead, it drives forward. So in our personality types, the truth is we have all 12. No one person is only one, but the question is, what is the dominant gene, the dominant force in our lives? So let's speak about it in real time. You'll find when we face challenges in life, you'll see some people retreat. They don't like confrontation. They're pleasers. They're very much the Aries personality. But there are times that requires fighting for what you believe, standing up for it, a certain determination, certain drive, the bull within you. Then you have people who have that drive to the point they trample on others. That's why you'll find in Talmudic thought, there's the concept of the ox or the bull that attacks others, that has gored another. And there's actually the distinction between one who's done one goring and one who's become a gorer, meaning they've repeated it, and that's how their personality has become that aggressive. Very often, psychologically, some people who are very aggressive, it's not because they're really aggressive, it's because they're protecting their own vulnerability. They've been hurt. You know, they say the porcupine has the sharpest needles and the softest underbelly. Sometimes to protect our own vulnerability, we project a tough exterior, armor, strength. So we see it can be distorted. At times it's necessary to protect ourselves. But a true relationship, you want to be able to have the humility and the balance. That at times you need to stand up and fight for something and not just retreat and not just give in and compromise. You need the bull in you. You need that driving force. Especially when you're dealing with forces that are trying to in some way annihilate or limit your potential, imposing themselves upon you. So you need that determination, that drive. But at times we need to also know how to yield, how to be flexible, how to be gentle like the lamb. So therefore, in that context, when you think of the months, the Exodus of Egypt is considered to be the loving act of the divine hand helping his children to free themselves from bondage. So we were on the receiving end, receiving this gift. But then comes the next month, and then comes Taurus, where there we have to demonstrate what we're capable of. So it's in a sense like Aries is more like the love that is bestowed from the top down, and Taurus is more the work from the bottom up. Refining ourselves, working on ourselves, introspection, commitment, taking upon ourselves the load, carrying responsibility. Especially in our day and age, it's so easy to live vicariously and to drop responsibility. You press a button, you get everything. But there's something, tremendous power lies in our capacity to generate something, to create something, to know that you have carried the load, someone has not done it for you. In education and inspiration, this manifests that you're teaching someone not just what to think, but how to think. You're empowering someone to initiate, to be proactive, to generate. And with that comes the confidence that you can carry the load. You can be bullish in that sense, with that driving force, with that power. So, as far as looking inside our own souls and our own psyches, Taurus teaches us the need to access that strength within us. That strength can be expressed in intensity, can also be expressed in very powerful restraint when necessary. And you'll see, like it is with every one of the features, every personality type, there are the challenges and the virtues. There's the ways that can express itself in a very powerful, positive way. It could also be destructive. As we see, as I mentioned, a bull could also trample, can also gore, can also be aggressive. So you need to know how to find the right place where to push forward and where to yield, when to hold them and when to fold them. And that's the wisdom of this sign. So if you have this, if you were born and you're connected to this period in time, and all of us, as we travel through this period in time, this is the characteristic to focus on. Do you fight for values that you believe in? Or do you avoid confrontation? And when you do you do it with humility? With a gentleness as well, but still with firm. You're firm. You're not wishy-washy, not like the guy that says, I used to think I'm indecisive and now I'm not so sure. That you have a certain determination. It could be quiet. It doesn't have to be loud, it doesn't have to be aggressive, it doesn't have to be imposing and dominant, but it has to be solid, like a bull. And once we're able to access that part of ourselves, you'll see that you'll be able to achieve many things in life. Many of us, as I said, retreat, shrivel in fear, cower, either because we may have been criticized or we just don't like to ruffle other feathers. But the intention here is not to ruffle. The intention here is to stand up for things you believe in. It's a critical piece that many of us today are lacking. I remember reading an article. They probably still have these retreats. These like masculine retreats. I think it was called Iron John back in the time, where men would come together for a weekend and wear skins and sweat and get back to that primal masculine energy. Not to be wimpish, not to be emasculated, grunting, sweating, climbing a mountain. So after one of these weekends, an executive comes back to his office and he's sitting and talking and he says, this was a tremendous weekend. It was very expensive, but I went and we sweated. I really connected to the man inside me, something that I lost for a long time ago. So he happened to run a company, which was a construction company. So one of his workers says, boss, if you want to sweat, you don't got to spend all this money. Just come down to our workplace and you could sweat with us. So his boss says to him, no, I don't really have the time for it. I scheduled a certain weekend. I carved out time. And he says to his boss, he said, boss, if you sweat when you want to sweat, it ain't sweating at all. In other words, to plan sweating is meaning it should be part of your comfort zone. You also have a little sweating on your resume, in your repertoire. Is not the real thing. Sweating really means getting out of that comfort zone. To be a bull in the real way means to push something, not because it makes you comfortable, not because it's another quality that you can check off and say, now I have that as well. It really means you're a fighter when you need to fight. But a fighter does not mean a fighter that offends. That doesn't mean a fighter that hurts others. It means you stand for something, you believe in something, and you're driven to do it, and you own it. You own it. That's what Taurus is. You own it, and you make sure it happens. And that's a feature that each of us has to access and each of us has to reveal within our spirits. And this is the time of the year when the channels, when that window of opportunity opens up. And now we have to do our part. So on a very practical level, find something you believe in. And on a daily basis, do something in that direction. Share something kind, but do it persistently. Taurus-like, bull-like, consistent. Do something that takes you out of your comfort zone. There's a time to receive, a time to be nurtured. There's a time to nurture others. When you act on it, it draws out that energy. It's like exercising that emotional muscle within you of gvura, of that strength, of that intensity. And that in turn opens up channels of intensity from above that bring us and shower upon us tremendous blessings, the Taurus-like blessings. Now we are in, as I said, Leo, which follows the previous Cancer, and all these programs can be seen on our YouTube channel as well as our other platforms. So check it out, and I hope this will be meaningful. So, as we've discussed many times, the signs are essentially predispositions. Think of them as archetypes. Just as different people are born with different personality types, each of us is born with certain predispositions. So Leo, which of course is the word for lion, in Hebrew it's Aryeh, that's the Hebrew word for lion. A lion immediately evokes certain reactions. We all think of a lion, powerful, awesome, certain regality even. The lion is referred to often as the king. The king. And we've all seen The Wizard of Oz. The king. Perhaps lacking courage, but still a king. The Talmud does tell us that the lion is the king in the animal kingdom. And then, of course, the roar of the lion. That roar. I don't know if you know this, but lions are from the few animals that actually roar together. Many animals roar individually. So what does the lion represent in terms of spirit, soul, energy, personality type? So I'd like to begin by quoting a very interesting statement from the ancient sages. This is called medrash, a medrash. And it talks about this period in time. And it says the following, loosely translated, that in the month of Leo, a lion will come and destroy a lion. So in the month of the lion, a lion will destroy a lion. On condition that a lion, and that in the month of lion, a lion will come and rebuild a lion. What is it talking about? This cryptic statement. The time of the lion is referred to this period in the year, this month of Leo. The lion that destroys is referring to Nebuchadnezzar, the lion of Babylon, the king of Babylon. And what did he destroy? He destroyed the holy temple, which is referred to as a lion. On condition that in the same very month of the lion, a lion will come, and who is the lion referred to now? God. When we say God, the roar of the lion is the awesome power of the divine, rebuilding, that will rebuild the lion, the holy temple. Now, what is the meaning of this statement? And what's the condition? Well, let's define what a temple is. The sanctuary is essentially, well, using modern lingo, is an interface between heaven and earth, between the transcendent and the mundane, between the divine and the diabolical. A bridge. We clearly live in a very material world, but we also have a spirit, a soul. The question is, can these two meet? Or do we need to compartmentalize? So Albert Einstein put it, E equals mc squared. That energy and matter are really reversible, and actually two Both are energy. But on a deeper level, the same concept is that spirituality, spiritual energy, and material energy are just two forms of energy. And they indeed are not just they can meet, but they're really two of the same. So the concept of integrating our transcendent lives and our lives of survival are actually discovering that deeper unity that connects everything. And that's what the lion represents as far as the temple goes. A place, a meeting place, where two forces come together. Tremendous power, material power, but when harnessed properly, generates tremendous spiritual power. That's what a lion represents. So in the month of the lion, there was a lion that came and used that power to destroy. Used that power out of ego and arrogance, of self-worship, to destroy the lion. That bridge between heaven and earth, between spirit and matter. But it's on condition. It's on condition. Because the real purpose of it all is that every destruction brings something that's even greater than what was there before. Like every challenge, every illness brings a recovery that makes you stronger than you were before the illness in the first place. So the condition is that in the very same month of the lion, a lion will come and rebuild this connection. So in psychological terms, what this means is for us to be healthy people, we need to have a certain seamlessness. A seamlessness between what you do and who you are. I ask a person, who are you? They give me their business card. I say, that's not who you are, that's what you do. So some people giggle, some people just give you a blank stare, and some say, oh, what should I tell you? I've been doing this for so long, what I do has become who I am. And some will even sigh and say, I know, it sounds crazy. It's like the ship tells the captain where to go, or the captain is telling the ship where to go. Who you are should dictate what you do. Not what you do should dictate who you are. But we often live from the outside in rather than from the inside out. So we respond to expectations, to demands, to pressures, to deadlines. Bills have to be paid. But we're not physical beings on a spiritual journey. We're spiritual beings on a physical journey. So it's your spirit, your soul, your very purpose in life and mission should be driving everything else. That's the bridge. That's when body and soul are in harmony. That's when there's an inner peace, where you're not being driven by disjointed fragments, but rather things are coming from a hub and then expressed through the spokes, rather than the spokes dictating the hub. So it's important to ask ourselves that question. Who am I? What drives my life? What's my mission statement? And you're able to answer that and then say, from the mission, I then express it through my different activities, my different thoughts, speech, actions, the different involvements I have. Then you have yourself an integrated life. That's the ultimate lion. And then you can take your material successes and the power and harness it, channel it and direct it toward fulfilling the very purpose of existence. However, when there's a dissonance, when there's a severing between the two, that's when all the issues come up. When people talk about feeling anxious, feeling out of place, feeling not aligned properly, you're talking about something that there is not harmony. Think about health. What is a healthy body? What does it feel like to be healthy? If you have any answer to that question, what it feels like, that's already a bad sign. Health shouldn't feel like anything. It's seamless. There's no sensation. The same thing on a spiritual and psychological level. So Leo, lion, represents that integration, or it can represent the destruction. Every malady, every challenge we have, every form of trauma or suffering, every toxin or pollutant that has in some way affected us, whether it's our insecurities or our fears, lack of self-esteem, is essentially the destruction of your lion. That's why it's called Babylon. Babylon, the Bible tells us, comes from the word confusion. Babel, to babble, the confusion of languages, the confusion of the language of your soul and the language of your body. They don't understand each other. And the rebuilding of, and the restoration, and the reclaiming of your very dignity and its expression in this world is the building of your lion. And you'll see people who often behave like a lion in a sense, violent, angry, is due to a dissonance that's happening. Not justifying it, just explaining it. And those that change the world with tremendous power are due to that harmony where it comes together. So similar to the previous month, but on a much more lower scale, Cancer. Talked about the crab that also has that paradox. So the lion, of course, in a more pronounced way, is a person of paradox. There are two forces at work, and they can go both directions. A king can be corrupt, can be a tyrant, can abuse, but a king could also be noble and humble and lead by example and use his or her power to transform existence. So the Leo personality type has those two elements, and therefore it reflects itself at times where it can go one extreme to be a very sad, tragic, destructive experience in life, or the exact opposite, a rebuilding of the highest order. Our purpose in life ultimately is to create integration, is to unite. I mean, the essence of all science is the search for unity, trying to find the common denominator, the threads that connect all the details, and to warn harmony. Harmony within diversity. That is the lion of our lives. We want to build such a temple in our personal lives, our emotional lives, our psychological lives, our spiritual lives, in the lives of our families, of our communities, and by extension, to everyone we can reach everywhere in the world. And it's this time of year, the time of Leo, the sign of Leo, where you have those two options. So who will rule? The confuser of Babylon, or the divine lion that takes his power and transforms a hostile world, a challenging world, into a divine garden, into a beautiful environment, where each of us, and each person is able to express his or personal mission in life, the dignity of your individuality, the dignity of your uniqueness, of your indispensability. And then, when you have that working, all the power in the world is then directed, harnessed, channeled toward tremendous revolutionary change. Now, some of us were not necessarily born in this period of time. We still have that personality feature. May not be as dominant, but the lesson is to all of us, but especially to those born in this period of time. And it's interesting, in our hemisphere, in contrast to the lower hemispheres, it's a time of heat, summer heat, especially this year. And heat too has both extremes. The passion of heat, the fire of heat, the perspiration, which on one hand can be very, very overwhelming and even destructive. Or say heat also brings passion in a positive way, to transform things. Those that have that fire, the zeal, that burning power, that burning sense of urgency. So, as in all things, the paradox can go both directions. May you and I and all of us use that line within us to be a king worthy of the title that changes, that affects, that influences, that inspires and empowers everyone we come in contact with. And if we do indeed see somewhere where this may be misused or abused, we do what you can to inspire, always in a positive way, to redirect and rechannel that lion energy into something that really creates true and lasting change. So I hope I've done some justice to a obviously profound and comprehensive topic. This has been Simon Jacobson talking about what the stars say about you, covering Leo. So let's move to Cancer. First of all, the first reaction when people hear the word cancer, especially today, is a very negative one. We all know what cancer is. The tragic, the horrendous illness that strikes people, unfortunately. May everyone be protected. And drives fear into our very heart, just the word itself. So it's interesting that is associated with it. Why is cancer called cancer? I'm talking about the disease, the illness, is because when it was first named, it resembled, the spread of cancer resembled a crab. Cancer is crab. The way it spread its legs and so on, it was similar to the way we saw cancer within the human body. But regardless, when you think of it that way, you realize there's probably much more going on here. And what exactly is the symbolism and the meaning of a crab? Cancer, crab. In Hebrew, the word for the zodiac, for this sign, for this month, is sartan, which also is used in both contexts, both the animal and the illness. So let's talk about this. What's interesting is also in this hemisphere, the upper hemisphere, meaning places like the United States and Europe and so on, it's also the beginning of the summer months. As a matter of fact, summer months are sometimes considered all into this category of this Hebrew month, Tammuz, the next 3 months, which are more or less the summer. Now, summer is an interesting paradox as well, and we'll be talking about the paradoxes of life, because that's really what a crab represents, what Cancer represents. Two extremes. So let's begin with a very basic observation, a basic study. A crab goes into the category of the animals that are crustaceans, which means that they have a exoskeleton, not a skeleton within, a skeleton that covers them up. And depending, a younger crab, it could be 6 times a year, later 2-3 times a year, or once a year, that it will go into that molting period where the crab is growing, but the shell is not. So what happens is the crab will slowly crack open the outer shell as a new shell develops and will crawl out in every possible way. Its limbs, its eyes, everything will emerge from the old shell, and the crab will now have a new shell, and the crab will go through this process several times in its lifetime, quite a few times actually. So what is the interesting twist here? As the lesson in life, this has been pointed out by many, that it teaches us about pressure in life, stress. Most of us, when we have stress, the first thing we do is we take a painkiller. Or we take some other way to numb it, to ignore it. Now, if a crab took a painkiller, it would never shed its skin and it would die. So the first thing we learn is that growth means a type of pressure and stress that allows you to expand, and therefore you have to remove a previous state of mind, your previous comfort zone, so to speak, the shell of yesterday, in order to grow into something larger and greater. It's a tremendous lesson in life. The lesson similar to the story with the caterpillar and the butterfly. We all know a caterpillar metamorphosizes into a butterfly. Now, it takes time as it goes through the chrysalis and the cocoon. So the story goes that there was an individual watching the butterfly beginning to emerge from its cocoon after months of being in that state. And the butterfly is struggling to get out of the cocoon. This compassionate person felt sad for the butterfly, so he took a knife. And cut open the cocoon so the butterfly can easily get out. Okay, he opens the cocoon, and what happens? The butterfly is sitting there, and he's waiting for the butterfly to take flight. No such thing. And then he realized, and he learned the lesson. The butterfly, in order to fly, needs the aerodynamics in its wings. The pressure, as the butterfly struggles, exerts itself to get out of the cocoon, forces liquid into its wings, so it'll have the proper balance, the proper aerodynamics necessary to fly. By preventing the butterfly from struggling, he actually did it a great disservice. He destroyed its life, basically, because it didn't struggle, and therefore the liquid never got into the wings. So it was a grounded butterfly. We have to understand, stress is not a comfortable thing. Obviously not. And it's not an end in itself. It's a process. It's every form of growth. If you're truly growing from one stage to another, there's going to have to be some form of stress, some form of discomfort. Because that's exactly what it is. It's a disruption. In Kabbalistic terminology, it says yesh, which is one state of being, one paradigm. To grow into another paradigm, to another yesh, you need an ayin. That's the Hebrew word, and ayin means a vacuum, a void. An uncomfortable place to create that transition, because if it's just a continuation of the past, then it's not going to be new. It won't be growth. So true growth is always going to be preceded by some form of discomfort. So instead of trying to avoid it, let us embrace it and understand its purpose. That's the first lesson of the crab. So the paradox is that not everything that seems painful or seems difficult is bad for you. It may actually be a blessing. The paradox is it doesn't look like a blessing. But when we read about cancer, we hear about cancer, you suddenly realize that. And indeed, this month, in the Hebrew calendar, is a month of paradoxes. This month of Tammuz, the very word Tammuz in Hebrew, has a meaning called heat, like from the name summer. But heat, we know, can go both directions. Heat, passion, can destroy you and others, or it could also be channeled and harnessed toward beautiful things. Tammuz is also the name of an idol. And at the same time, Tammuz has in this month the beginning of the destruction of the temple. But then we're told by the prophet that the purpose of the destruction would ultimately lead to the transformation of darkness to light. So this month is symbolic of that type of experience in life. There's a certain part that is beautiful, but it has to emerge sometimes from the challenges of life. And the lesson is very, very clear. That growth is going to consist of removing an old shell, one layer of skin to assume another layer of skin. For those born or those experiencing this period of time, it has that dual characteristic. So on one hand, it does have a negative imagery. The crab itself is sometimes identified with indulgence. It's a water creature. It's associated with water in the symbols of it. It's also the only sign that's controlled by the moon. The moon is another paradox. On one hand, the moon has no light of its own. To quote the Zohar, the classic mystical text, the moon has no light of its own. It receives its light from the sun, but when it receives the light, it has a very different type of experience. It's not just a mirror image of the sun. There's something about the mystique, the haunting color and shape of the moon. You see two people in love, you never see them staring at a sun, you see them staring at the moon. The moon controls the tides on Earth. The moon has a unique relationship with us on Earth. And it has that same paradox. It waxes and wanes. So when it's waxing, it grows into something great, and then it begins to wane. It begins to shed a previous layer, a previous shell, and is about to become extinct. It's reborn again. The symbolism of birth In Hebrew, the word for month, the lunar month, means rebirth, renewal, chodesh, chidush. So newness requires leaving something behind from the past. You look at a physical crab and you see that. So Cancer represents that element. The personality of Cancer, you'll find people who have a certain sensitivity, but usually sensitivity and empathy does come with understanding these dual sides. It also teaches us that life is a process and a journey. So as we begin the summer months, the summer as well offers us the same challenge. On one hand, the summer we all look forward to as a certain time of relaxation, of calm, warmth, and everything that comes with it. Vacation, which is beautiful, allow time for rest, time for reflection. But as we all know, that the summer also can be a very big time of indulgence, many challenges involved. You know, the cold winter months don't quite have that same type of expansiveness because we're either closed up locked up in a room or home due to the cold out there. And cold in general is something that really keeps us, we need to protect ourselves from. The warmth opens us up, connected warmth with water. You see people going to the beach, other water. So this is a summer. So summer has on one hand a powerful force at work, which is the very heat, the light, longer days, and everything that the summer elicits, midsummer night dream. But we have to also be careful from the other side, not to become too comfortable, to realize that perhaps on a material level we can be more relaxed, but on a spiritual level, on a transcendent level, this is a great opportunity to grow into new states and new levels of our expanding our horizons. So you see that the signs are not just signs, but they also reflect the time of the year and how it affects each of us in our lives. What do they say in the recovery movement, in healing? They say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I like to put it this way. If you think what you thought and you say what you said, you're going to have what you had. I should add, if you think what you thought, you say what you said, you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. It's a mathematical certainty. Brilliant, right? But what is it really saying? We like change, but we don't necessarily want to change. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. But it doesn't work that way. What is insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting different results. So this month of Cancer opens us up to another way of looking at things. In previous signs and previous months, each part of the zodiac, each dimension had its own particular energy. Here, this is an energy of transition, an energy of paradox, an energy of appreciating the vicissitudes, the ups and downs of life. And if you think about it, actually, wherever we turn, we see that. Your heartbeat is continuously beating, contraction, expansion. Your breath, exhale and inhale. There's no such thing as a static life, as a stagnant life. Life, by definition, is mobile. It's pulsating. It's vibrating. I remember once speaking to a cardiologist, a very sweet guy, used to come to my classes, and he was one of the sweetest guys I knew, but he had a very difficult life, a lot of difficulties, personal, family. He was a cardiologist. So one day he asked me, he says to me, out of exasperation, he says, perhaps you can just intervene up there, and I'd like to have a day of peace, a life of peace. Just calm relaxation. So he was an intelligent guy. He liked a good joke as well. So I said, do you mean, doctor, like a flat line? He said, no, not that peaceful. Because you know, a cardiogram is not a flat line. That's not what you want to see. You want to see a perfect wave. Yes, a peak, a valley, but all very measured and very commensurate to each other, proportionate. You don't want to have extreme peaks, which is extreme anxiety, or extreme valleys, which is extreme resignation. You want to have the proper balance between angst and integration, between some measure of restlessness, yes, in order to grow a new shell, in order to become a greater person. And that's what growth is all about. That's how it grows. Right now, you probably don't even aware of it. You're not aware of it. You probably took between 15 I say probably, for sure, between 15 and 18 breaths, exhaling and inhaling the last minute. Who even thinks about it? Thank God we don't have to think about it. When you see someone struggling to breathe in a hospital with a ventilator, God forbid, suddenly you appreciate what are the dynamics, the mechanics necessary. So breathing is a perfect example. It's like the heartbeat of the pulsation of the pulsating forces in life. And that's how we have to see our lives. The thing is, in our world, interestingly, with all technology and all its growth and its acceleration, we are slowly becoming more like couch potatoes. I could sit at my desk, lie in my bed, in my couch, and just press buttons. Press buttons, channel changers, or to order something. And that's creating a situation, ironically, where all of technology is based on these pulsating energies, that we become couch potatoes, meaning moving about less and less. I understand we're told to exercise, so we go out to exercise. But the natural human being is a living, mobile entity. It's constantly on the move. And movement means that there's going to be changes, and changes means there are going to be moments of discomfort. Now, of course, we pray and hope that it should be minimal. It shouldn't be anxiety-ridden. It shouldn't be extreme. But we must have that angst. We must have the angst of the Cancer. We must have it. And that's what is a result of our growth and allows us to grow further. So as the crab molts, what's happening is the pain, that the pressure that's building up as the crab grows out of the shell, which has not grown, causes the crab to shed that shell and ultimately assume another one. Tremendous lesson in our lives. I know some of you may ask the question, seeing me, look at me, I look pretty Jewish, right? What about the fact that crab is a non-kosher animal? Yeah, but it's still God's creation. And as God's creation has many lessons for us. You know, there's a very fascinating story how King David, who always praised God's world and saw the beauty in every aspect of detail of design of the world, once said to God, I understand all the different creatures and animals, but what about the spider? He couldn't find a purpose for the spider. Well, as fate would have it, he was being pursued by King Saul, the Bible tells us, and he had nowhere to run. The only place was a cave. He ran into the cave, but there he was stuck, because if they would come in there, he had no place to escape. And God sent a spider to weave a web across the mouth of the cave. Of course, if a spider weaved a web, it's a pretty good sign that nobody has entered there for a while. So they passed on, the soldiers just moved on, and he realized how this spider has saved his life. Everything in existence has a tremendous lesson for us. And that's exactly why it's created. Some things are meant to be eaten, some things are not meant to be eaten. Just like there are many things. There are poisonous mushrooms, there are many different foods or other items that we can learn from it. That doesn't mean we have to consume it. And that indeed is also another paradox of the crab. It may be non-kosher, it is non-kosher. But at the same time, like I said before about the month of Tammuz, that may not be a non-kosher animal, but it teaches us tremendous lessons about life. And sometimes the deepest lessons come from the darkest places. There's an expression in the Talmud that says to cut down a tree, you need the wood of the tree to cut down the tree. An axe, the handle of the axe is made from the wood of the tree. That's ultimate transformation. So in many ways, when we have setbacks and negative experiences in life, it's not just that we should grow from it and embrace it because it's a process of growth. It's also transforming even the setback into part of the process. It's one spinning wheel life, one long narrative with many different frames. And look at your life that way, and things change. We get often caught up right now, I'm comfortable, I'm uncomfortable, the moment, instant gratification. We like to press a button. But remember, life is a process, and an emerging one at that. A process means that things are on the move. When you see it that way, even when something may appear as a setback or is a setback, pain, loss, suddenly you feel restless. Nobody likes it. That's exactly why it's so powerful. We like our comfort zones. But as in the process of growth, in the name of growth, we grow through those comfort zones. So, tremendous lesson in life. I hope I did some justice to it. I'm sure more to say, much more to say. May we all grow in our lives, grow to the greatest heights, but always know that the greater the growth, the more the frustration, the more the vacuum, the more the even disorientation that will precede it. That's how it is. If you ever wrote a paper or anything that you ever presented, there's always going to be that awkward state, that confused state, because you're moving from one paradigm to the next. May those paradigms continue to come our way. Let's not resist, let's not escape them, and learn how to grow to being the best and greatest possible person you can be. Let's talk about Virgo. The Hebrew for Virgo is Basula or Betula, which means virgin. And it corresponds to the Hebrew month of Elul, which is the last of the solar months, meaning the month that precedes the high holiday season, beginning with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the New Year. And there's some fascinating lessons we can learn about love from this month that, of course, radiates and is more dominant and than the rest of the year. So even though love is something that we all need all the time, like oxygen, and yet there are months and there are times in the year when we'll call it the channels are open, wider, less filters, less layers, as the mystics like to put it. And this is a month like that. But why? Why this month of all months? So the word Elul in Hebrew is an interesting word. It's an acronym that's based on a verse in the book, the Song of Songs, which states the following. Beautiful, beautiful poetic acronym. So of course the Song of Songs is a romantic narrative between two beloved ones. So the expression is Elul, 4 letters in Hebrew, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Initially sounds very nice. It's poetic, it's romantic, but there's a lot more that meets the eye in what true love is all about. One of those most elusive of experiences. We all need love, but very few of us know how to find healthy, sustainable love. So books have been written about it, poems have been written, songs. I don't know if there's a topic a topic that has been more written about than love. And as the cynics like to remind us, love continues to dominate bestseller lists because it doesn't work. If it worked, you wouldn't need to have another book. But the fact is, it still remains elusive. You can't live with it. You can't live without it. What is the secret to love? What is the secret to love? And I wish I could say it's just pressing a certain button or taking a magic pill, but we all know it's not that simple. So we're going to talk about that. Love, and in this context, Virgo, which refers to the purest of all loves, is like, the first time you fall in love, there's something about it that is impossible to replicate. The innocence, the adventure, the free abandon, just the rush, excitement, enthusiasm. I mean, so much, not everything can be expressed in words even, but we all know what it's like. Unfortunately, as time passes, love comes and then people get disappointed, promises are broken, dreams are shattered, betrayals, losses, all the different things that happen to us, and we get jaded. So this month is coming to tell us we can renew our belief in love. But to do that, we need to understand what it is. As I said, we all need it. In the Hebrew, the mystics explain that the word for love, av, is the same as the word for echad, one, unity. So it's really about connection, about attachment. That is more necessary to the human being than anything else in existence. I know we need oxygen, we need water, we need food, we need sleep, we need many, many things. But attachment is the thing that we get the earliest stage in our lives. From the moment of conception, through obviously the entire gestation, pregnancy process, what was the most dominant thing for a fetus as it's developing in its mother's womb is attachment. It's connected with the umbilical cord to its mother, like an extension, being fed through that lifeline, everything it needs. Complete, total, absolute nurturing without any supplements needed. Total, like being totally underwater, protected, sheltered, nurtured, physically and definitely spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. I mean, science doesn't have all the tools to even figure out what kind of impact that has. But for 9 months. And interestingly, unless a mother is truly very abusive, even if the mother is in a bad mood or whatever she's going through, that pretty much the fetus, the developing embryo, is pretty much immunized from almost anything going on outside, in the outside hostile, difficult world, the anxieties of the world, the challenges, the ups and downs, and so on. Now, this were to continue in a new child's after birth, even when the umbilical cord is cut. Then you'd have parents who continue to nurture the child and create to cultivate that sense of connection, attachment. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise, because we human beings, as much as we like to say we're independent, we all need that connection. What is a human being without connections? What is a human being without a companion, without a partner, without a friend, without someone that cares? If you put it in the more spiritual terms, the very essence of spirituality is experiencing a sense of belonging, a sense of I fit in, a sense of transcendence to something that's greater than ourselves. That is, beyond words, one of the most critical elements of life. So love really comes down to is more than just a sexuality, the pleasures of love, the companionship of love. It comes down to a deep need and a deep experience of a higher sense of unity, a seamlessness, you can say. It's like when you stand before something that really is beautiful and it captivates you, mesmerizes you. What you're experiencing is a oneness. Subject and object melt into one. You know the feeling. You're absorbed in reading something and listening to music in a connection. True love, when a person is at the height of their intimacy, what will they experience? Something that you don't even feel. You melt away. You completely get dissolved in the experience. That is the ultimate oneness, the ultimate form of love. And it's interesting, even though I use the word need, I would not define love as a need. Because need would mean like the need. I need to eat, I need to drink, I need a piece of bread, I need sleep, I need this. It's much more than need. It's a transcendent experience, meaning actually it's something going beyond your needs. True love is you experience something greater than yourself. And hence the expression about this month of Virgo, the idea of I am to my beloved and my beloved to me. First thing that jumps out at you is there are two entities. And there's reciprocity. It's not one person is doing the work and the other person is responding. It's call and response, cause and effect, action and reaction. In the words of another beautiful verse in the book of Proverbs, just as a face is reflected in water, one heart is reflected in another. Again, the reciprocity of things. Very often love gets caught in the trap of all our negotiations in life, which is give and take. You give me this, I'll give you something in return. I remember once counseling a couple, and I said to the guy who was very, we'll call him narcissistic, fine. And he says, I said to him, did you ever hear of unconditional love? And he said, yes, if she did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and he counted maybe a few more things, then I'd give her unconditional love. By him, unconditional love was not a concept. Why would I just give if I don't get something in return? Now, we all understand there's an element of give and take and so on, but it's not based on that. It's not based on my needs being met. That's an extension of the connection that's there. In other words, the reciprocity is not about, okay, you do this, then I'll do that. True people who truly love each other don't wait for the other person to initiate. Each one can initiate. So Anila Deidili firstly is almost like a command, I would say, an obligation if you wish. I don't like to use those words, command, obligation, especially in the context of love, but you'll see what I mean. It means it's something that behooves us. We're compelled. Initiate. I initiate. I am to my beloved, and my beloved responds. I look at the water. It reflects back to me. You want it to reflect back to you without you looking at it? I remember, it reminds me of that country boy that lived all his life in a little country house, and he never saw a mansion. He never saw a big city. He never saw, by extension, mirrors. A mirror, a simple mirror. Anyway, one day, he's traveling with his family. They come to a city. They come into a house, a nice mansion, full of mirrors. And of course, right in the foyer, as soon as you walk in, there's a big mirror. He looks in the mirror and he starts crying. And the host comes up, why are you crying? He says, there's a child looking at me in the mirror and it's making all these very sour faces at me. Why? What did I do wrong? So the host says with a smile to the child, if you smile at the child, he'll smile back at you. With a mirror. So it really comes down in life, it's what you initiate, what you generate is what you get back in return. So in real love, it's not about, okay, let me figure out what am I getting from this relationship. It's what are you giving to the relationship. That's the true meaning of love, which also introduces a concept I've mentioned a number of times. The concept, it's just hard to find the English word for it, but it's bittul, B-I-T-T-U-L. It's not about you. It's about suspending yourself in face of something greater than yourself. And then you become far greater than you are. That's the interesting paradox. So the same idea is here, that love is about getting out of yourself, you know. It's not about, I'm trying to remember the exact story. There was this person who told me they were married for a long time and then started falling apart. It fell apart in their bedroom. Their sexuality was very beautiful, sex life they had for many years, but then it became very much experimenting and he didn't feel his needs were being met. It started creating all these bedroom politics and just everything became so tense. They ended up divorcing, unfortunately. Two beautiful people, I must say. But what happened? I remember when I was speaking about it individually, and what happened, love turned into something more about my pleasure, which is great. Love should be very pleasurable. Absolutely, we all agree. But it became my pleasure was the most important thing. When in truth is the focus should be her pleasure or his pleasure instead of me. I am to my beloved. I am here to you. I initiate. I turn to you. I'd like to know what you like. And then you always get something in return. It's like watering a flower. You don't try to pull the flower out of the ground. Give me what I need. Water the flower and the flower will blossom. The flower will do what it has to do. But we live in a world of acquisitions. We live in a world of commodities. We live in a world of I press a button, I want it now. Respect for the process. Understanding that things emerge. They don't always just come when you want them to come. Things emerge and it's a process. It's something that, with all our industrialization of things, our commercialization, our technologies have created a situation almost like an illusion. Technology is good. You press a button, you can get an order from Amazon within a half hour. Or you get information immediately, instantaneously. But when it comes to the true matters of life, the eternal values of life, we'll call them, things like soul, love, truth, transcendence, happiness, these are things there are no buttons to press, and there's a process and there's an emergence. And that is the story of Virgo, the story of emergence, respecting that. And a flower is an excellent example. Flowers, we know, are symbols of Virgo, symbols of Psula, of a virgin, because of their purity. And their petals open, their petals closed, they have that mystique to them. And it's all about something that you cannot force. It's something you have to allow to emerge. So we are living in a time of crisis, let's be honest. A crisis of love, a crisis of intimacy. You see it all over. You see it in marriages, you see it outside of marriages. You see it in the level of commitment. You see the impact. Many people see commitment as a dirty word. There are people who tell me, I want a relationship without commitment. Yeah, commitment for the moment. And I ask myself, 1 second, it's like saying, I want my flowers to blossom, but I don't want to water them. I mean, what does that mean? So it's like a distortion where we think we could press those buttons because love became another commodity. It became an exercise. It became, I would say, technique. Sexuality is about technique. It's about a verb. What are we going to do? When the truth is that sexuality, love, is about a noun. It's a state of being. For women, the feminine version of it is always more of a state of being. For men, it is an action. But we need to we need to master. I don't want to say the word master. That's not a good word because we never master love. But we need to master the vulnerability, the surrender to allowing something greater to enter into our lives. And that is the story of this month. The story of I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. A reciprocal relationship, not dependent on reciprocity, but natural reciprocal, like the face reflected, excuse me, in the water. Love. I look at the innocence and the simplicity of love in children's lives. And then you compare it, you juxtapose it to what's going on in the larger world. The distortion, it's so painful to see, because one of the most beautiful things, that freshly fallen snow, that Virgo experience of pure, innocent love, that was without all the jaded, without the politics, without all the complexities and neurosis, without the neurosis, that simple love. Now, as adults, obviously we can't just go back to that place, but Elul gives us little taste as before we enter a new year. And a new year, as the mystics explain it, is a new energy. A new energy enters into our beings, into our psyches, into existence itself on the cosmic level. So what better way to enter into a new year is by reclaiming, revisiting our Virgo, our love. And sometimes that comes after we've been hurt. Yes, interestingly. Because sometimes we take for granted the loves we have. Things when there's a betrayal, a violation. In some way, something has been ruptured. And then we dig deeper. We often can find something we don't find initially. So all that is included in this Virgo, month of Virgo. So those born in this period of time, keep in mind that you have that, I guess, more dominant gene, if you wish, predisposition to this purity. But all of us go through this month as well, so it's really a message and lesson for all of us. And it's about finding that element of connection, that attachment, that is so nurturing to yourself and also to the other. And it ultimately comes down to is two becoming one. That's really what it is. But two becoming one. It's not about dominance or about passivity. It's not about control. It's not about an uneven relationship. It's about an honest, reciprocal circle. Two halves of one circle. Two halves of one whole. That's what the story is. I am to my beloved is to me. And when you have that, it's literally like going underwater. When you're underwater, what do you feel? You feel like you dissolve in the water. You don't feel like there's two entities. Obviously, we don't live underwater, but conceptually, psychologically, how would it feel like if you knew that you're always embraced, an internal hug, an internal embrace that accepts you unconditionally, that no matter who you are and what you're doing, no matter whether you've accomplished, whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood, you're looking good that day or not looking that great, whether you're more productive, less productive, anything, all these externals don't matter. You're just embraced unconditionally. That is the month of Virgo. That's what Elul is. And when you have that, in a way you can begin with a new slate, clean. This doesn't mean we ignore the past and we forget about the future. It means that we can dig deeper and find a place that no matter what has happened, no matter what wounds or scars we've endured, what battle injuries we may have experienced, we have a deeper place that's called love. And it's a love that connects to something far greater than we are and actually connects you to a place that's far deeper than anything. If you're able to access that, you're then reaching a place that's beyond all your life experiences. And that should be feeding you and feeding everyone around you. So is it accessible, doable? Absolutely. You have to sometimes eliminate or at least try to put at bay your cynicism or your sarcasm or your resignation or your giving up, and realize that we can access that part of us. The pilot flame is burning, and in this month of Elul, Virgo, we have the power to access it, the pure, unadulterated love, connection, attachment. And it begins small. It can begin small. It begins sometimes you reach out to someone for no particular reason, not because you want something in return. We're just saying hello. I want to share a kind word, especially for people that we deeply love. Especially with people we may have had even some type of run-in or some tensions or some falling out. Maybe this is a time where we can revisit and say, you know what? Life is short. Let me try a new way. And not get trapped in pride and vanity. Oh, I'm waiting for that person to call me. Sometimes you just initiate. Anila Deidi, I am to my beloved. And magic happens. Initiating things also puts you in the driver's seat in a way. Because instead of being a victim or waiting for something to happen, you make things happen. And making things happen always open up new doors. So may you and your loved ones, and may you and all those that are close to you, may each one of us experience a true Virgo, a true Psula Elul, one that is renewed, one that gives us a fresh approach, like pressing the reset button where we can look at ourselves and everyone around us in new ways and indeed experience a love, an unconditional love, an absolute one that touches that very indispensable heart and core of who you are, that loving, beautiful, seamless entity connected to everything and to everyone, each of us contributing our unique energy, and together a synergy that creates a far greater and most beautiful cosmic symphony. Thank you so much, Simon Jacobson, with deep love and affection, especially during this month. Love to hear from you. Let's reciprocate. I to my beloved to me. Everyone should be blessed only with a beautiful, loving month, and a month that extends throughout the entire year in every possible way. So, with that, please share with others. What better way loving people is by sharing. And let them share with you. Love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your comments. And of course, subscribe. Subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. Share with others so they can subscribe as well. Again, love to hear from you. And please stay in touch. Stay connected. Until next time, thank you.